What's up guys, the Code Holic is here. Welcome to the first part of building an MVC framework using PHP. In this part we're going to implement custom routing, we're going to implement controllers, views, layouts, and come up to the project structure. So let's get crazy and start building our own MVC framework in PHP. I want to highlight that this video, the only purpose of this video is pure educational. Okay, so we're gonna learn something, but it's not recommended to take this and use it on production websites. All right, let's start, and I'm gonna create index.php, which will be the main file entry script of our MVC framework. And for now, I'm just gonna write echo hello world. Okay, I'm gonna open the terminal. I'm going to use PHP Storm's integrated terminal, which I set to use the git bash. So you can use any terminal, basically, just make sure that you have PHP command globally available. Okay, we type PHP -s, localhost port 8080, which will start PHP's built-in server. And when we open localhost port 8080 in the browser, it should give us hello world. No matter what path we provide right here, whether it will be users, for example, it's going to show hello world. It's not going to show not found. This happens because always this index.php is served. And this index.php in general will be our entry script. All the requests will be handled by this. And then we're going to set up some routing. Okay, so let's have a look in the index.php and let me show you how I imagine this, how it should be. So I want to create a variable of application, new application. I want to create a variable, for example, for router, okay, is new router. I want to tell the application to use the router and pass the router right there. And I want on the application to call run method, which will simply handle everything. But on the router, I need to be able to configure some roles. For example, when get request is made on /, it should execute the following function. Function this, which will return simply hello world. Okay? We can do even better and avoid this router completely. So make sure that the application will create router in its constructor, and we can configure the routes in the following way. So we will remove this creating new router just like this. We will remove this use router. It is user router, but we're going to still remove this. And on the application, I'm going to call on app router. Let's configure get URL. So for this, we have to create at least two classes, application and router. So let's do this. I'm going to create folder core, which will be the core, basically core folder, which will contain all the classes of the core CMS. Later, we're going to make this core installable using Composer. So we're going to try to make our MVC framework as close as one of these out there popular frameworks, Symfony, Laravel, E2, and we want to make this core installable because if we just manage this core and release some updates and people have installed that core, they can update their core on their websites, right? So I'm going to create now application class. And the application needs obviously some kind of constructor. And in the constructor, it must create the instance of the router. Okay, so I'm going to create another class, which will be router. And the router needs get method, but let's do the application class first. So I'm going to create right here public. I'm going to use PHP 7.4's features, which is typed properties. Okay, so I'm going to specify that the router variable basically will have type of router. And right now PHP Storm puts the red underline on this. Typed properties are available to PHP 7.4 only. I can click this link, switch to PHP 7.4 language 11 in PHP Storm, and the error disappears, and basically we can write the PHP 7.4. Or I can open the settings and configure there that the PHP Storm to use PHP 7.4. So if we just don't do this, it doesn't mean that it's not gonna work. It will work because I have installed PHP 7.4 on my machine. Make sure you also have PHP 7.4 installed on your machine. If you don't, simply go to the XAMPP installation, download the latest from apachefriends.org, download the latest version, which includes PHP 7.4, and install it. Okay, if you are on a different operating system, you can still find a suitable version for you for Linux or for Mac OS. Okay, so I have PHP 7.4. I can hit this link, or I'm going to open the settings, file, settings, and right here I can search for PHP. So we need to find the language section, where it is language and frameworks, PHP, and right here the PHP language level is set to 5.6, which is very old, and I'm going to set it to 7.4, hit the OK, and the error basically disappears. Or I could do it easier, just I wanted to show to you how you can do this from the settings. Okay, now I'm going to create this router equals to new router. Okay, just like this. Now, if we just open index.php right here, and if we just include this application class, we should have access on the router property. Okay, so how should we do this? We need to write require once right here to include the application. Require once or require or include once, whatever you like. And in the application class, we need to also require router, because the application class basically creates an instance of the router. So, and imagine that our framework will get larger and larger, and we have to create more and more classes, and we have to always require them. It's not actually very good practice and not acceptable in 2020. So we have a better tool for this, which is called Composer. Probably you are already familiar with it. So we need to create our project as a Composer project. So if you don't have Composer, get on the following website, getcomposer.org, or just type Composer in the Google. The very first website will be what you want. Just download for your operating system, install it, and in the terminal, in the command line, you will have Composer command globally available. So let's do this. I'm going to open second terminal and just type there Composer init. So I have Composer command globally available, so I can run this. Right here it asks me what's the package name and vendor name. So this is the vendor name basically, and this is the package name. I'm going to leave it as it is, hit the enter. I'm going to leave the description, I'm going to leave the author. It automatically picks up my information. Okay, minimum stability, package type, I'm going to leave basically everything empty. Okay, so I'm going to hit just enter multiple times, and finally the Composer JSON file was generated. So let's have a look. Right here in the project we have Composer JSON. If we open here, we have all the information what we provided, name, authors, and require is empty object. This is on which packages our MVC framework should be dependent, and right now it's not dependent on anything. Okay, so the only thing I want to configure right here is the autoload property. Okay, so I'm going to type autoload, and PHP Storm auto-completes it for me. Then I'm going to choose the PSR for standard for autoloading, and I'm going to specify that the app namespace corresponds to the current folder. And what does this mean? This means that any class which is created right here in the project folder should be under app namespace. If we want autoloading to work, and if we want to avoid writing require or includes on the classes, we need to configure autoloading. Okay, so now what we need to do is that we need to change our application and router namespaces. Okay, I'm going to specify that the router namespace is app \core. Okay, so because every class in this folder, in the main folder, PHP MVC framework folder, should be under app namespace, so we have nested folder right here, core, and namespace name must match to the folder name. Okay, so that should already be auto-loaded if we try to include the router. The next thing is to go to the application and have the same namespace right here. Basically, I'm going to copy this from the router, put it right here, and I'm going to also specify right here in the doc block what's the namespace without the namespace and the semicolon in the router as well. So I just type app / core. Okay, now we need to open the terminal once again, and because we configured the autoload right here, we need to run composer update, which will read this autoload, do some things for us, and it will also create vendor folder right here with a couple of files inside with the composer folder, and this will help us for autoloading. So it should need a couple of seconds, so let's wait until this is done. Meanwhile, I'm going to go to the index.php. It is actually already done, and vendor folder appears right here. And right here we have composer and autoload. So what I need to do is only require the autoload. So I'm going to use the dir magic constant from the current directory. I want to go to the inside the vendor folder and include this autoload PHP. So now every class, if we use it with the correct namespace, can be autoloaded. For example, this application. So this application is under namespace app core. If I use it with the following namespace /app /core, so I can actually create an instance of this. And in the same way, if I go inside the application and I use the router, I need to specify the namespace name. But right now, application and router are in the same namespace. Both are in the app core namespace. So I don't have to specify namespace name right here in this case because they are in the same namespace. Okay, right here we can do it even in a different way and remove this app core right from here and just write use app /core right here. Okay, app /core application. So basically I'm telling that, hey, I'm going to use app core application right here in this file, which will be the application class. And now I can create an instance of the application. All right, so good. So far so good. And we need to create now two methods, get method on the router and run method on the application. So let's do the easy one first. And I'm going to create a run method on the application. And we're going to do a couple of things right here. So I'm going to type to do right there. Let's go to the router and I'm going to create right here a public method get, which will accept the path and it will accept the callback function. Okay, so whenever the path is this callback must be executed. And we need to save this. So this is basically an associative map. So if I just copy and paste this and call this contact, for example, and write there contact, this is a map. I'm configuring that on this URL, this function needs to be executed, and I want to save this somewhere. And then whenever run is called, I want to decide what function to execute. Okay. So let's go to the router and right here, I'm going to create a private, or let's create protected array of rows. Okay. So which will be by default an empty array. And right here in the get, I just want to type these rows. So I can do right here in two ways. So for example, I can put inside the rows for the given path what is the callback, and I'm creating this as an associative array for given path. This is the callback, but later we are going to create similar function for post, and if we do like this, we might have a different function right here for post. So for get, it might render the contact form, but for post, it should handle the submitted data of the contact form, right? So what I need to do is just to configure for get or for post. So I'm going to create a nested array right here, specify get. So inside the rows basically will look like this. So on get, it will be an associative array. For slash, it will be some callback callback function, /contact, it will be another callback function, and in the same way we're going to have a post right here. Okay, I hope this makes sense. So I'm going to remove this quickly, and right here, so we have already configured the routes, and now we need to work on the run method. So what we need to do right here, so on the run, basically I'm going to call this routers resolve. Okay, and this router resolve doesn't exist at the moment. So if you're using PHP Storm, you can just click inside the method, hit Alt and Enter, add method, and this will create function inside the router PHP for you. Okay, so right here we need to determine what's the current path and the URL path basically, and what's the current method. And based on this, from this routes array, we need to take the corresponding callback and simply execute and output the result to the user. Okay, so let's do this. So we have this super global server, for example, which contains all the information we need. So I can dump this and show this to you. So let's open the browser, reload, and here is our super global server. And right here we have a couple of information, and what we need is that path, which is displayed right here, /users. So the request URI is basically what we want. Scroll down, we have path info as well. And if we just delete everything and just access on the root domain, so in this case request URI is /, but path info basically disappears. It's not there. Okay, so let's test one more case, /users ID equals something. We will need these kind of URLs as well in the framework, right? So in this case, the path info basically points to whatever we want, /users, but the request URI returns with ID equals 1 as well. So in best case, we need to take the path info, and if the path info is not presented in the super global server, we can assume that it is the /. Okay, so we can do like this to determine the current URL. But later, when we take this our framework and create a virtual host for this, and for locally or for production environments, the Apache basically doesn't have this path info super global. At least in my case, when I tried on my XAMPP installation, when I tried to do this with the path info, Apache didn't read that path info. It didn't have that path info. Maybe that's created by this PHP's built-in server, which is started right here. And let's do it differently, and let's take this request URI basically and take everything before the question mark, okay, to make sure that our MVC framework will work in different environments, in Apache or in production. Okay, so let's come right here, and we have to take the request URI, and basically I'm going to create right now a request class, and I don't want to interact directly to the super global server, so I'm just going to quickly create request class in the core folder. PHP Storm automatically took the namespace, and in the request class I'm going to create a couple of functions. So get path, which will do something. We need get method, and later we will need also get body to take all the data, get or post data. For get path, we need to take this request URI and take everything before the question mark. Okay, so let's take the path, for example, which is from the server to take the request URI. If the request URI is not presented in the path, we can assume that it's false. Okay, for some reason that we shouldn't have any kind of error. So, or we can assume that it's the /, okay, the main domain. Now we need to check if question mark is presented in this or not. Okay, so basically I'm going to create a variable position, which is strpos, give the path and give the question mark. So it basically searches this question mark in this path and allocates its position where it is. And the position will be false if there is no question mark in the URL. Okay, and we can dump this right now and have a look. So position, let's go to the router, and right here we need to access the request class instance, what we just created. So I'm going to create in the application, I'm going to create right now the another property which will be for request. Basically, such kind of classes like request, router, maybe database, session should be part of the application so that we can access them anywhere from our framework and call some methods and get some data. Okay, so I'm going to create right here public property request, and I'm going to create an instance of the request right here as well. This request is new request. Okay, and I need to access the request instance from the router. What I can do is that I can pass this request instance as a constructor inside the router. Okay, so first let's declare the request and then take the request instance and pass it to the router. So now if we open the router class, we need to create right here a property for request, just like we did in the application. Okay, so I'm going to copy this, go to the router, create property right there, and generate basically constructor. So I'm going to hit Alt and insert on my PHP Storm, come down to the constructor, hit the enter, and I'm going to choose only request property. I want to generate constructor with the request property, and here we have it. Okay, now I can access in this resolve this request, and I can call get path on this request, and this get path basically var dumps something at the moment. So let's have a look. Refresh, and here is the position of the question mark, which looks good. If we just remove this, now the position is basically false, and we need to check like this: if position equals to false, this means that we don't have question mark in the URL, and we can immediately return the path. This is the final path. Okay, so however, if there is the question mark, then we need to take the actual path. In this case, path equals to take the substring from the given path from position 0 until the position of the question mark, which is saved in a variable of position. Okay, in this case, this should be the path, and we can immediately return that path. Now, if we go to the router and assume that this is the path, and we can dump this path, we should see it correctly. We need to test every single component, every single method, what we do very carefully. So right here we have /users, which is correct. If we just type $ID equals 1, hit the enter, the path is /users, which looks good. If we just remove everything and leave on the main domain, the path is /. This looks already good. So we have path, and we need also method. Okay, method is this request get method. Okay, this get method right now is not implemented, it doesn't return anything. So let's go there, and I'm going to return from the super global server, let's take the request method, okay, which will be get or post, and I'm going to convert this into lowercase, str to lower, and this will simply be get and post in a lowercase. Okay, right now I can dump this method there as well, and it will be get or post in a lowercase. So I'm not going to do this because it looks very simple. So now from these rows for the given method, we need to take what is the callback. Okay, so callback equals from these rows for the given method, I want to take a callback for the given path. Okay, we have method, we have path, so we just can take the callback. However, and we can dump this callback and we can have a look as well. However, if it is not presented, if we just refresh it, we see that this is a closure object, and the closure is basically a callback function which we can execute. However, if I just type some URL right here, /users, for example, hit the enter, we're going to have an error because for method get, there is no callback for users. Simply doesn't exist. So we can dump the whole rows right here just to clearly understand what's going on. So this is how my get looks like. Inside the get, on / this is the function, on /contact this is the function, and we don't have any function on users. So we should not have such kind of errors, notice errors when we try to access the URL which is not there. So instead, maybe we can use the double question mark, which checks if it is set or not and returns the value if it is set. However, if it is not set there, we can assume that it's false. And right here we can make a check. If the callback is false, So we can immediately return or just echo not found. Okay, and when we echo, we can exit or return or do something. Okay, so right now, if I just reload the page, I see not found. So this is page not found. We haven't configured this. This is good. However, if there is callback, we need to execute this callback, and we can execute the callback using function called userfunc. And the first argument basically is the callback what we want to execute, and this function will return some string. If we just have a look in the index.php, this returns some string, and what we need to do is just output the value what is returned from this callback. Okay, let's just open browser, refresh it. So we have not found, but if we just try to access the home page, we see hello world. If we just try to access /contact, we see the contact. So using this, we have successfully implemented already routing in our framework. So we can configure right here as many get routes as we want, and we can navigate between pages, and we can see that it actually works. All right, now I'm going to show you one more thing, which is very important to consider. So if we just type right now, composer JSON, this returns basically every information from my composer JSON, and the end user basically can see this. Okay, it's a very bad practice to have index.php and composer JSON at the same level in your project. Okay, instead, we should have some classes, some files and folders which should not be accessible from the browser. Okay, in this case, what we need to do is to create an web accessible folder. In some frameworks, it's called web, in others, it's called public. I'm going to call public. And I'm going to move my index.php inside the public, okay, and open the terminal. And right here, when we have started this, I'm going to just close this, go to the public folder, navigate there, and start the server from there. Okay, now the server is started from the public folder. If I just refresh, it shows not found because there is no composer JSON in this public folder. There's only index.php, and that's the file which basically should be accessible from the browser. If we just try to access the home page, we're going to have an error because when we move the index.php into public, we have to configure the path to the autoload PHP. So I'm just going to go one directory back, and it should already work. We have successfully the pages are opening basically, and we can navigate just like we are doing it before. Okay, now let's go ahead and create a couple of more folders in our project. So I'm going to create controllers. We're creating an actual MVC framework, so we need controllers, we need modules, we need views. I'm going to also create a runtime folder, which very often exists in the frameworks, and it's for user-generated data. Some caching files, some, I don't know, PDF, temporary PDF files, or whatever it is that goes inside the runtime. And finally, we're going to commit and push this, of course, the framework on our Git, and we don't want the user-generated data to be committed and pushed. Okay, cache files, for example, it should not definitely be committed and pushed, or log files. Everything, such kind of files can go inside the runtime. And I'm going to create right here a file which is called git ignore. And probably you know what this does. And I'm going to comment, I'm going to ignore everything with asterisk right here, except the git ignore itself. Okay, so we will be actually able to commit and push the runtime folder itself with the git ignore file, but not the files and folders inside it. All right, this looks already good. We can create one more git ignore file in the root directory, git ignore, or I can make it easy and copy and paste. Okay, and in this root git ignore, I'm just gonna ignore the vendor folder, because that should not be committed and pushed. Whenever you run composer update or composer install, it will generate the vendor folder. And I'm going to also ignore the IDEA, which is the IDEA folder, which is the configuration folder for my PHP store. Okay, awesome. Now let's implement actual views. So if we just open the index.php and have a look, right here we have function on contact as well. But contact actually can be a very large form, and we don't want to hard code HTML forms inside this contact string, right? We want to have a view for this. So now I'm going to improve my routing, and right here, instead of having a function, I'm going to assume contact. Okay, I'm going to write there just contact. And what I want to implement is that the router basically will have a look in the views folder. It will try to allocate there, this should be a file, contact, let me create contact PHP, and it should actually return contact, the content of this. So I'm gonna right now just write h1. Okay, let me close the PHP opening tag, and inside the h1 I'm just going to write contact. Okay, and I have to implement now that on /contact this view to be rendered from the views folder. Okay, if I just right now try to access the contact, we have such kind of error, call user function expected parameter 1 to be valid callback, but function contact not found. Okay, so let's go to the router, and right here when we call this call user func, we just need to check if the callback is a string. I'm gonna use the method isString the callback. In this case, I'm gonna assume that this is the view file, and I'm gonna render this. So I'm gonna just write. Actually, I'm gonna change one more thing. So instead of like always echo something from here, I'm gonna return always. I'm gonna remove this exit. I'm gonna return from here as well, and I'm gonna return here as well. This render view. This function doesn't exist, so we're going to create, and I'm going to pass their callback. Okay, this render view. So let's create this render view, pub/f. Before I actually implement this render view, because we changed this into return, we won't have any output at the moment. Okay, so if we just have a look on the /contact, for example, it doesn't do anything, because this doesn't do anything because this render view is not implemented. But if we just try to access on the home page, which should actually output hello world, this doesn't work because we are returning some value, and this resolve is called from the application. So we need to go to the application and echo whatever is returned from this resolve. So okay, so in this case I have echo written in one place only, not in a multiple place. So let's just reload the browser. We see hello world, we won't see anything on the contact, and we need to implement this. Okay, right here in this render view we accept the view, and I want to render this view. And how can I do this? So I'm going to include this view right here. Okay, and I can just specify that I want to include and render this view, and from the current file, the core, for example, I want to go one directory back, or let's just use the magic constant dir. Okay, I want to go one directory back, go inside the views, and render contact dot PHP. Not contact obviously, but the view PHP. So I'm basically going to change the single quotations into double quotations so that I can inject this view variable right here. Okay, so view.php, this is the file I want to include. And right now, if I just open the browser, it should already print the contact. Inside the h1, you see how big this is. And we can view the page source, and here is the h1. However, so we cannot actually work with this approach in a real MVC framework. Okay, we need to also consider the layouts, and sometimes we want to pass some values, some variables inside the views, right? So let's implement this step by step. And right now I'm going to create home PHP, and I basically want this home PHP with the layout. So I'm going to use Bootstrap because it's very easy and nice. So get bootstrap.com. I'm going to go to the documentation, scroll down, grab this starter template, and put it right here in the home. And we can write the hello world as it is right now. Let's open this index.php, which is the entry script, and I'm going to change this into home. Okay, so this will work. I didn't do anything magic right here. So we have this hello world, but with the actual full HTML, and we have /contact. However, if I just copy and paste right now this in the contact, so we are duplicating something. So I can write here contact us, for example, but we are duplicating a couple of code. So we are duplicating the head and the down below the body, script text, and so on. So we have them written twice in the home PHP and contact PHP. Although it's working fine, we can navigate between these two pages. So we have this problem. And I'm going to also copy a navbar HTML. So let's search for navbar, scroll down, take the whole navbar and put it right here above the h1 tag. Okay, format the code, and I want to leave right here home slash contact, which will have text of contact, and I'm gonna delete everything else what it is right here. Okay, so including the form. So this is basically how the navbar will look like if I just don't delete this, and I just want home and contact, nothing else. Okay, so let's go to the home page. So let's save this and refresh. And I did this for the home page, so let's go to the home page. Oops. So, and right here we have this navbar. So I'm going to zoom out slightly on 100 pixel, 100%, and here we have contact and home. However, we need this navbar inside the contact as well. And right here we are basically getting more and more stuck. Okay, we're repeating a lot of HTML, which shouldn't be done, of course. So I'm going to create right here a folder for layouts, and inside the layouts I'm going to create a file which is called main layout. Why I'm doing this? So later we're going to implement multiple layouts, not only single one, but multiple layouts as well. Okay, so you probably have seen that on some websites you have a layout with the sidebar and without the sidebar, with the navbar and without the navbar, and so on. And we need to do like this as well. So I'm going to open the home, copy everything from home, actually cut everything from home, go to the layouts and paste everything right here. So what I need to do is create a placeholder where the content should be outputted, the page content. So right here, instead of hello world, I'm going to create a placeholder just like this, and I'm going to call the placeholder content. Okay, so this is where the actual page content should be outputted. Okay, so let's go to the home, and right here I'm just going to have h1 with home. I'm going to go to the contact. I'm going to have h1 as well right here, contact us, and whenever we try to render contact, the h1 will be injected right here in this area, and the same thing will happen for the home page. Okay, right now it's not implemented, so we have to do this. So let's go to the router, and right here when we render view, we want to render view inside the layout. Okay, so I'm gonna right now create another method which will simply return the layout content. Okay, so layout content equals this layout content method. Okay, so let's create this layout content, or I can easily do this alt enter once again, and that can be protected. Okay, protected function layout content, and I want to render the layout. So how I do this? So I can actually include once the layout, just like I'm including the view file with the dir, but we need to consider a couple of more things. Okay, first of all, we are using magic constant dir right here, going one directory back and doing things like this, which is not a very good solution. So we need to store somewhere in the application what is the root folder of the project, of the framework. Okay, so if we just open this index.php right here, we know that this index.php will always be inside the public. Okay, and we can assume that the root directory for this project will be, I'm going to dump this, dir name for the current directory. Okay, the current directory returns a public folder, and dir name of current directory will return this PHP MVC framework. So if we just have a look in the browser, this is the current folder the project's root directory basically. And if we save this somewhere, then we can access it, and instead of putting D right here, the magic constant, we can use the project's root directory / views and whatever it is. And we can do the same thing for layouts. So what I'm going to do right here is to pass this dir name dir into the application constructor right here. For this, we need to open the application and accept path right here, and let's call it root path, for example. And we can actually save this as a singleton, and we can actually save this as a static property of the application or as an instance of this application. Okay? Okay, let's save this as a static property of the application. Self, and I'm going to create a static property right here, public static. It should be actually string root dir. Let's do like this, root directory. Okay, and then I'm going to write self root directory is the root path, whatever is this. Okay, we are creating just single instance of the application, so we are sure that the constructor won't be called twice, it won't rewrite anything, so we have this root directory. And right now in the router, I can access this root directory with application root directory /views /view PHP. And I can do the same thing right here. Okay, so I'm going to copy this, paste right here. Instead of views view PHP, we're going to have views layouts /main PHP. Okay, this is the layout. But this layout will return some content, and we can have a look in the browser right now. So this is how it looks like. If we just view page source, we have the whole layout, including this content placeholder, and down below we have this h1 home. So we want to take the content of the layout as a string, this content, and replace the content with the following h1 tag. Okay, so I'm going to do like this. So I'm going to call a function obstart, which basically starts the output caching. So when we call obstart, nothing basically is outputted in the browser. Okay, so obstart include this. Then I'm going to call obgetClean, which returns the value, whatever is already buffered, and clears the buffer. So we start caching of the output. This is included, so this is the actual output, and then we just return this instead of outputting to the browser, and we just clear the buffer. And right here we will have this layout content, and I need to do the same thing for views, okay, and take its content and replace inside the layout. So I'm going to create one more function right here, which will be called let it be protected function render only view. Okay, which will take the view and we'll do basically the same thing like we did for the layout. Views view.php. Okay, it just renders the view, and right here we have the layout content, and we're going to have the view content as well, which will be this render only view, pass the view there, and then we need to return str replace, just search for the content placeholder inside the layout, replace it with the view content, okay, just like this. Okay, and we can return this immediately, and let's have a look. So we are calling this render view right here, so this should already work. Refresh, and here we have home and contact, and we have this in the layout. So if we just view page source right here, scroll down, we have this contact us replacing this content placeholder basically, and we can see the same thing for home. Scroll down, right here we have it, okay, which is awesome. All right, now I'm going to do one more thing. So if we just try to access non-existing path, so we have this not found, but if we have a look in the network tab right here and refresh this, this returns status code 200, which is not very good, because very often when there is a not found, the browsers basically return with status code 404. and we need to do the same thing right here. So I'm going to create a class in the core right here, response class, and this response class basically will have a function set status code, okay, which will be an integer of code, okay. And right here I'm going to call http status response code, the code, whatever is this. So I'm just setting the status code, and I want to call that function from the router whenever we just print this not found, okay. I want to access to the response as well. So how I do this? In the application, first of all, we have to create this response variable, response, just like this. We have to create also an instance of this response. And now I want to access this from the router. So I can, of course, do something similar, just like what I did. So I can pass the response instance to the router as well. And actually, I want to do like this, but there is a second way how we can do this as well. So we should be able to access the application instance, the instance which is up right here in this index.php, from the whole application. Okay, so that whenever we want, we just call on application, response, or request, or router, and we can just call some methods on this. Okay, so in the application constructor and also in the application properties, I'm gonna add a public property, public application app. Okay, and right here I'm gonna set that. Actually, I'm gonna make this a static property, okay? Public static application app, and I'm gonna set self app equals this, okay? Using this approach in the router, I can access the response in the following way: application app response set status code 404. Okay, which will do the thing, and we can return the not found. So let's save this and have a look. Refresh it, and here we have it, status code not found. However, just because I'm just passing the request in the constructor, it will be good to pass the response as well. So I'm going to copy and paste this response variable, paste right here, and I'm gonna hit Alt Enter, and I'm gonna put this in the constructor as well. So I have a couple of options right here. Okay, so generate getter and setter for this property and so on. And actually, I want to add this in the constructor. Okay, so I don't know if there is an option for this. Alt and Enter, add in the constructor. I don't see this, so I have to do this manually. Okay, no problem. So let's just do like this. I'm going to remove this app core request. Okay, because the router and the request are in the same class, we don't need to specify the namespace. And I'm going to write here response, and this response is response. Okay, just like this. And the response basically is something, the PHP storm doesn't like something. Okay, what's going on? Okay, yeah, it wasn't added in the doc block. So now it looks good. And down below, right here, I can call this response set status code. This response set status code not found, which will give us the exact same result, but with an error. So that happens because in the application, we just don't pass this response. Okay, save, refresh in the browser, and we see this not found, which looks good. Okay, now it's already time to implement controllers. So again, let's have a look in the index.php, and we have right here home and contact. But we have to also, first of all, we have to render the contact form. This is the one thing what we need to do, and we need to handle also submitted data. And that submitted data needs to be obviously a function. It cannot be view. Okay, so I need to duplicate this, and right here, whenever post request is made on /contact, so I can write here function. Okay, just like I had before, but that function might become very large and long, and I don't want this. Actually, let me show that this actually works. So let's just write handling submitted data. Okay, and let's just create this post method. Okay, just like we have get, I'm going to duplicate this. We need post right here, post and post. This is as easy, okay, and this will already work. However, we need to trigger the post from the contact PHP. Okay, we need form. So I'm going to go to the Bootstrap again and search for forms. I just want to quickly copy and paste the HTML, just don't lose any time. So copy the following HTML, paste right here. Let's format the code, and I'm going to remove all these things, ID 4, just to have a minimalistic HTML. Okay, so what's going on? Aria. Okay, yeah, I'm just going to clean up everything. So we have just type email. We don't want this help. So I'm going to remove this 4 and ID as well. Okay, and just change this into, for example, subject. So when we make a contact, this should be subject, type should be text, and name should be subject. And I'm going to duplicate this 4 times. So we're going to have an email, our email, okay, that should have a name of email. And for simplicity, let's just make one more thing, which is just body, and that should be text area. Okay, so it doesn't need type, it needs name to be body, and just like this. So let's remove this whole thing. We just leave the button, submit, and we have it. So let's have a look now. So let's go refresh it. Okay, just like this. And actually one more interesting thing which I just noticed. So when we just access and not see the not found, in a best case, we should see this in the same layout, just like we are seeing the other pages. Okay, so that I can easily now click to the home page or contact page to go back to existing page from non-existing page. Okay, so let's do this as well. So let's go to the router, and down below, when we render this not found, which is basically a string, we have 2 options right here. Okay, so like we have render view, so we can duplicate this and have a function render content. Okay, and this will be content, and this will be basically view content. So let's call it directly the same name and just remove this rendering, and it will work in the same way. Okay, and right here now I can call this render content and pass right there not found. Okay, and this is now how it will look like. So we have this not found in the layout, and I can go to the home page or contact page, whichever I want. Okay, but in other in real frameworks, the not found can be more than just 2 words, right? It can be nicely formatted not found page, and we have to do this as well. So if we just go to the views and right here create, for example, underscore 404 page, okay, and we just put right here h1 not found, okay, and from the router we just render the view underscore 404. Okay, this is how it will look like. Not found in a h1 tag, but this gives us possibility to apply some HTML and CSS on this to make it nice. Also, what I want to do is put everything in the container. So I'm going to put right here container and put the content inside it. So now if I go to the contact, this is how my contact page looks like, and whenever I hit this submit, it should be submitted with method post, okay, not with method get. So let's go to the form, contact PHP, scroll up, and right here on the form I'm going to add action to be the current string. Okay, I want to submit on the same URL on the contact, and the method will be post. Okay, so let's have a look. Refresh it, hit the submit, and right here we see handling submitted data, and that comes from the index.php right here. Okay, obviously in a real applications we have to take the data right here, send an email, maybe save in the database, so the logic in this function will definitely get larger and larger, and that's why we need controllers. Okay, we need a separate place where all the logic will go. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to remove this and replace into an array and populate the first and second elements of the array right now. But first, let's go to the controllers, and right here, I'm going to create site controller. Okay, it should have namespace as well, namespace up / controllers. Okay, and we can write here as well, up controllers. Oops. Okay, and in the site controller, we need actually we can have more than one method right here at the moment. So let me show you what I mean. So right now I'm going to just create action. So I'm going to create, action, or we can just call it contact, okay, or handle contact, okay. So, and right here, I'm going to return the same thing, handling submitted data. But the main idea right here is that this handle contact should be executed whenever we try to make the post request on the contact form. Okay, so how should we do this? So first of all, let's go to the index PHP, and right here I'm going to write site controller class. This is the first argument, and the second argument will be contact as a string. Okay, so this is an array. And if we go to the router PHP, scroll down. If the callback is a string, we assume it is a view. If it is not a string, in this case, we have two options. It might be the function, just like we had it before, or it might be array. Okay, and if it is the array, and we pass this array to the call user function, it will actually work in the same way, just like passing a function. So this call user function will try to execute contact method of this site controller class. Okay, so what I want to do right here is to replace this namespace. I write site controller right here, and up controller site controller use right here. And if we just save this and have a look in the browser, just refresh it, which will resubmit the data. So right here we have call user func expects parameter to be valid callback. Class up controllers site controller does not have a method contact. That's actually true because I called the method handle contact. Or so maybe later we can have right here a contact page as well, contact, and this should be post contact or handle contact data or whatever. Let's call it handle contact. Okay, so I'm just gonna put handle contact right here and refresh it. And here we see handling submitted data, which comes from this handling submitted data. But why I created this contact right here? Okay, so maybe we want to render, even if it's a get method, maybe we want to render view from the controller. And why we might need to do this. So what I'm going to do right here is that instead of just passing the view right here, I want to pass again the site controller class contact. Okay, and what does this mean? This means that I want to on whenever get method, whenever get request is made, I want to execute the following function, and from here I want to show the contact form. Okay, show contact form. Let's just have a look in the browser, and we see that if we just try to access with the get, we see this show contact form. So I want to render view from here. Okay, so in the best case, I need to be able to render view from here. And how I can do this? So I can call the application. We have the application app, okay, and the application app has access on the router property, and the router has render view. Look at this, and we just pass contact, okay, and just like this, we are able to render view. And why I might need this? Well, because sometimes when we render view, we want to pass some parameters. For example, let's do on the home page. So I'm going to duplicate this and let it be home page. And right here, I'm just going to create params array, which will be an associative array, where name is, for example, the codeholic. Okay, and what I want to do is to take these params and pass it to the render view. okay, just like this. And later I want to be able to access the home page. Inside the home PHP, I want to access to the name variable which is passed from here. Okay, in best case I want to write welcome PHP echo name, where welcome the Codeaholic. Okay, this is what I want. This is what is my final purpose. And how can I do this? So first of all, we need to open this render view and accept right here params. Params, which will be an array. And we need to pass these params into a render only view right here as well. And right here inside the render only view, we get the params. And for making this very clear, I'm just gonna dump these params and we can have a look. Okay, so when we render contact, we don't pass any params, so it's an empty array. When we access the home page, okay, we don't see still anything. That's interesting thing. Why we don't see this anything? So render only view. Okay, so let's go to the site controller again. So we call from the home page we are rendering contact, so we just need to render home. Okay, and we want to configure from index.php that on the slash it should call site controllers class home. Okay, just like this. Now refresh the page and right here I see undefined variable name. Okay, but let's go to the router and put this var dump right here, and here is the params. And I want to create a variable name right here which corresponds to the Codeaholic. Okay, so let's go to the render only view, and what I'm going to do is very tricky and interesting. So I'm going to iterate over the params right here, and the param is basically key value pair. So key, and we have value, and the key basically is name, and the value is the Codeaholic, right? So I want to put the key, right key, which is a name string, and I want to put one more $sign right here. Okay, so if this evaluates, so if this, let me zoom in. So if this evaluates as name, in this case, this will be evaluated as a name variable. Okay, and the name variable basically equals to the value, whatever is this. In this, using this approach, I have name variable declared right here, and I can dump this name just like this and have a look. And here is the Codeaholic. Okay, and then what happens here is that whenever I include the view file, this will be home PHP in our case, the include will see these variables. Okay, and just like this, we have home welcome the Codeaholic. Okay, so this works just like this, which is amazing and fine. All right, now we need to also handle the submitted data. Okay, so we have done this on the home page, which looks good, but look at this first of all. So we are repeating this long line many times. So in best case, we want to render it in this way. This render, just this render and nothing else. Okay, we give the home, we give the array, and it simply renders. So how we can do this? We have to create a base controller class in the core. So I'm going to create right here controller class, which will have public function render, just render, which will accept a view, and params, params with an empty array by default, and this will return application app router render view pass params, and that's it. Now in the site controller, we have to extend our site controller from the controller, which comes from the app core namespace, and we have this render method, which is awesome. Now I'm going to call this render right here as well, and here we have it. So we did many small things, just improvements, but here we have one interesting problem. And whenever we have some errors, definitely we need to read the error to understand what's going on. And right here, the PHP basically complains that you are using this when not in an object context in the site controller's line 24. So we are using on line 24 right here this variable. But we don't have an instance of the site controller created, and we don't call this home on the instance. So why does this happen? If we just open the router, scroll up right here when we call the call user function, this is an array. The first element of the array, according to Linux PHP, is the class. Second element is the method. And this method is called statically using this approach. Okay, so what we need to do right here, write an if statement. If the callback is array, so I'm going to create an instance of the controller. Instance is new, and from the callback I want to take the zeroth element, which is the controller name, and I'm going to create the instance of the controller with a new keyword in front of it. I can put parentheses as well, but this doesn't make any change at the moment. Okay, so and this is the instance, and I can put the instance back inside the callback on the 0 index. Okay, so callback at index 0 is new callback at index 0. And using this approach now, if we just dump the whole callback right here, we see that it is an instance, it is an object, okay, not class. If we just comment this is array and the thing, here we have this class as a string, but right here we have it as an object. And now this call user func will still work in the same way, and we now have this context right here, and the rendering works like a charm. Okay, fantastic. Now we need to handle the submitted data. We started this many times. So, and how should we do this? So first of all, let's go to the request. Okay, request class, and in the request I want to add a method get body. Okay, and this should return all the data. So I can actually access the data right here, of course, with super global post. But I'm not going to do this, and I'm going to also explain why I'm not going to do this. So the post data might contain some malicious characters right there, submitted from the user. And if we just take the post data, we have to sanitize this data. We have to make sure that we remove all the invalid symbols from there to make it clean and secure to use, and only in this case we need to use. And if we have multiple forms like this registration form or login form and contact form and some others, we have to take the post data in all controller methods. And by the way, in MVC framework, the controller methods are called actions. So in the actions, we need to take the post data and just sanitize this, remove invalid characters, and do like this. But we have to do this in multiple places, okay, if we have multiple forms. So it's always better to do this in a single place. And this will be the request get body. Right here, I'm going to create a body, an array, which will be finally returned. Okay, this is the final array. And I'm going to write an if statement. So if this get method is get, okay, then we have to iterate over super global get as key value pairs, and we have to sanitize the data. Okay, so inside the body for the given key, I'm going to call filter variable. Okay, I'm going to pass right there the variable, the constant basically, which I want. No, this should be called basically filter input. Okay, and right here I want to pass what kind of input should it be. So I'm going to specify input get constant. Okay, I want to filter the input with the get, and this is the input key, and then I'm going to call filter sanitize special chars constant. Okay, so what this will do, it will have a look in the super global get using this constant. It will have a look in the following key, take the value, remove some invalid characters, and put it inside the body. And using this approach, we have secure body data, the get data. And we have to duplicate and do the same thing for post. If method is post, I'm going to iterate over my super global post, body key, filter input, input post right here, and the same thing is the same. Okay, the other things. So using this approach, now I can get the data. And let's go to the site controller. And now I want to access the request instance, okay? And do some things, actually call this get body. So how I can do this? I can call application app request, it should be request get body, okay? But again, so this is not very convenient. I can do it definitely better than this. So how should we do? So this basically prints the whole body. So we can make sure that this is what we want, and we can just print this and have a look. And here we have it. If we just open the form and type there some subject and hit the enter, here we have all the data. But I want to accept a request instance right here in the method. Okay, so what's going on right here? Undefined class request. Why it's undefined? App core request. Okay, this is the class I want to include, and the use basically was automatically added right here. And now I can call directly on request get body. But the thing is that this request variable is not passed to this. Okay, so let's have a look. So we have an error. Too few arguments to function. Site controllers handle contact. And we need to go back to the router PHP, and when we call these, we need to actually specify the argument, request argument, okay? So call user func accepts second, third, and more arguments, which will be the arguments of the function, of the callback. And I'm going to specify right here, this request. So let's have a look. Now it works in the same way as it was working before, and we actually have the submitted data right in the controller, which we can take, make some validations, and do whatever we actually want, okay, which is awesome. All right, now I want to start working on the registration. Okay, so for this, we can create a method right here and configure in the index.php, or we can create a new controller for this. I'm going to actually create new controller for this, called auth controller. And this must first of all extend from the core controller. Then right here, we can have two methods, login, which will return this render login. Okay, and the second method, register, which will return this render register. Okay, just like this. And we have to open the public index.php and configure the roles right here. Okay, so let's duplicate this, and whenever get method is called on login, it should call auth controllers login method, and I'm going to replace this with the use. And let's duplicate this. Actually, we need to duplicate this 2 more times. Okay, so whenever post request is made on the /login, we can actually call the same login method. Okay, and the same thing for register. Okay, right here we call register. Okay, and this is the get, this is the post, and we can actually make a differentiation whether it's a get or a post right here in the controller. Okay, so how we can do this? So we are accepting right here the request. We know this, now we have implemented this. Okay, I can write an if statement. If the request get method is get or post, we can do it differently. I'm going to make this even more simpler and create helper functions. So let's go to this request class, and right here we have this get method. And first of all, I'm going to make a code refactoring. Okay, so if I just click inside the method, right click, refactor, rename, I'm going to just call it method. Okay, hit the enter. What this basically does that it finds all the references in the project and just renames. So we know that we are using right here, it was renamed. We know that we are using in the router right here, it is renamed. Okay, so this works like this. So I can hit the Ctrl+Z to undo this, and we can have a look that this is get method right here, Ctrl+Shift+Z, which will redo the same thing, and we have method right here. So this is kind of tricky things, like tips and tricks, what you need to know. Second is that I'm going to create a couple of more functions. So is get, and what this does, should do is that this method, if this method equals to get, this will return true. And we can do the same thing for post. So is post, if this method is post, this will return true. In the auth controller, we can just call if the request is post. Okay, we just right here return handle submitted data. Okay, and otherwise we just render the form. So now let's have a look. So first of all, we have to create the login and register views. So let's go to the views, and I'm going to copy and paste the contact and call it login. And one more time, copy and paste and call it register. Okay, so let's go to the register first. So we need first name of the registration, first name. We need a last name, email, and password. Okay, so last name, and right here we can specify also the name, last name, first name, email, and we need password. So let's duplicate this 2 more times, and this will be password. Right here we're going to have password as well. This should have type of password, and this will be confirm password or password repeat. Okay, whatever we want, password repeat. And this should also have type of password with the name of for example, confirm password. Okay, let's actually call this confirm password as well. Okay, we have the registration form. We can open this and have a look. So let's open the page, and actually I'm going to add the login and registration in the navbar. Okay, so let's open the layouts main PHP. Right here we have this navbar, and I'm going to duplicate this UL, give it a margin left auto, and this should be login on /login. This should be register on /register. Perfect. Have a look right here, click, and here we have it. If this is contact us, which we also need to change, register, create an account. Perfect. So okay, I'm gonna make one more thing. So I'm gonna take these 2 form groups. Right here I want to create a row. Inside the row I'm gonna create 2 columns. Okay, just like this, and paste the rows right there. So the first name, last name, email, password, confirm. We don't want body, so we can fully remove this, and we have the submit button. Looks good. If I just hit the submit, it shows the not found. Why does this happen? So let's open index.php, and right here we haven't configured register. That's the reason. Refresh it, and here we have handle submitted data. Perfect. So we can actually start working on handling the submitted data right now from the auth controller. But before this, so let's implement the second layout. So let's say that whenever the login form is opened or register form is opened, we have the different layout, and let's say that we don't have this navbar anymore. I just want to implement the second layout in the system. So first of all, we have to create a second layout, and we can call it, for example, auth. Okay, this is the layout, and in the layout I want to remove this navbar completely, and this is how it should look like. But from the auth controller I should be able to specify that, hey, I want to use now auth layout and render the content inside the auth layout. So In the best case, I want to have a method this set layout right here, and I'm going to specify auth, for example, and basically do the same thing for registration as well. Okay, and we can actually do exactly like this. So I can create a function set layout in the base controller, in the core controller right here. So let's create public function set layout, which will accept the layout and has to do some things right there. So how we are using the layout? If we open router PHP, we are using layout right here, layouts main PHP. Okay, so what I can do is that I can change the layout of the controller, but I need to take out this and make a property of the router class. So if I just make this property of the router class, I can change it from the controller, but I think there is a better idea. If we just create a protected property, maybe right here, or let's make it public property. Let it be public string layout, okay, which by default, let's say that it is main, okay. So we have an instance of the controller created in the router. If we scroll up right here, this is the instance of the controller we just created, okay, and I can take this and set it in somewhere so that later I can access that controller and use that controller's layout property right here. In the best case, this is the application, okay. Inside the application, I'm going to create a property public controller, just like this, and I'm going to generate setter for this, or I can make it public and just assign it. So let me generate setter in any case. So Alt and enter, generate getter and setter, for example. Here is my getter, here is my setter. And from the router, when we create the instance of the controller right here, I can set this, okay, application app controller equals new controller, this new whatever is this, and now I can access this right here. Okay, so let's just take the layout equals application app controller layout, which is the main, and we can inject this layout right here. Okay, perfect. And in the controller, I can set the layout using this layout equals the layout, whatever is given. So using this approach, when auth controller is called, I set the layout, applications, the controller's layout changes, and the changed layout is used right here. So let's open the browser, open the registration page, and using this when not in object context, so that this happens again in the auth controller line 33. So this happens because I missed one thing. Scroll up. So when we set this up, the application app controller, I want to put this back inside the callback at 0 position. Callback at 0 is application app controller, which is the instance of the controller, right? So now if I refresh the page, I see the registration page inside a different layout. We don't have this navbar anymore. So it's just the registration page. So this just is the example that we actually created the second layout. If we go back to the home page, on the login, we actually do the same thing. The login is not implemented, and it's better to just write there at the moment nothing but login, okay, but it's definitely in a auth layout as well. Okay, other things, the home and the contact, are in the main layout, which is good. Alright guys, that's the end of the first part. If you enjoy this so far, make sure you hit the like button. In the next part, we're going to implement modules, forms, and validation.